Right, so good morning, welcome back. This will essentially be our last lecture for this module. So remember, you don't have to come in for the following weeks. Yes, you can keep your Wednesday mornings free. So what I will do now is I will go and explain the last lab set that we have available for the module, which is Kickstart. Okay, I know very few of you will have finished with the DNS lab set by now. However, some of you will this week. So then you can easily get started on Kickstart either at some point this week or next week, whatever you like. Including this week, we still have 4 weeks of work ahead of us. So you actually have enough time to complete all of the tasks in the lab set. So don't worry about it. Progress-wise, the whole class is doing quite well. We're actually pretty much a week ahead of where I was expecting us to be. So that's great. So I will explain all the details about Kickstart, and then you can work at your own pace through everything else. So the whole idea behind Kickstart is that we can do operating system installations remotely and in bulk. So our labs in Anglesey building and our labs in Buckingham building, so anything that has Linux installed in it was not built by some poor guy sitting on each and every one computer and installing the operating system on each of them individually. Yes, we have deployment servers, as we call them. We have a Kickstart server, and that Kickstart server holds the configuration files and all necessary information for each of the computers that we have to actually be built and configured automatically. So all we need to do is basically start up our computers. If something goes wrong, choose to boot from the network. It will automatically start with a Kickstart menu and then say, yes, I want this type of installation on this computer. And then after about 20 minutes, it's built. All right, and it's ready to use. So I will show you how to basically configure and run this process. There are 2 ways that we can do this. We'll start simple with using the CentOS DVD as the source and as the beginning of the installation. And then later on, the extra part for this lab set is to actually do what we call a PXE boot. So you can have a sort of deployment server that actually starts from the network completely, and you don't need to have any installation media available at all. So in order to do this, the first thing that we'll need to have the network infrastructure in place. So our server for this installation will be our Prometheus virtual machine. So everything that we do that is done on the server will actually be done on the Prometheus VM that we're using. The client that we will build will be a new blank virtual machine that you will create, and you leave it be without an operating system so that your Kickstart can actually install the operating system on it and get it going. So we need to create this, we need to have this in place. Now, in order for this to happen, we need to create a new blank virtual machine. So you already have 3 or possibly 4 virtual machines in your network. You will need to create one more. Now, this lab set is sort of detached from the rest of the lab sets, partly because you don't need the other virtual machines for this to work. And in fact, if you do have other virtual machines running, you should shut them down so that you don't have any problems, especially with the IP address allocation. This will be because I would expect you to deploy this blank virtual machine on subnet 30. So essentially this will replace your vPrometheus 0 VM. All right, so as a virtual machine, when you build it, you will have to create it. You will need to run the fix vmnet dev script on it. That will create 3 custom network cards. You delete the second and third card, and you only keep one that's connected onto the vmnet 0 network card. So this will essentially be the hardware infrastructure, the networking infrastructure that's necessary behind this so that you can actually deploy the system. So once you build this virtual machine, once you have that virtual machine in place and you have the networking infrastructure for it, you can basically continue with all of the ingredients, all of the elements that are necessary for the Kickstart installation to actually work. Now, Kickstart depends on various services running correctly and running well with each other as well. The first one of these services that you will need to have in place is DHCP. So you'll need to configure your Prometheus VM to be a DHCP server for the virtual machine that you're building so that Kickstart can actually use it. Now on Moodle, you will find that there is the lab sheet and then there's a folder called Kickstart Utils. In that Kickstart Utils folder, you will find an example of the dhcpd.conf file. Now this file is the first most important step in the installation, and in fact 90% of the problems that come up with Kickstart not working are because of a misconfiguration in this particular file. So you need to be a bit careful about this one. So I will configure this as an example for my computer. My computer is Shume, and I use the last line in the networks. In the network, say it's in A2net subnets. So the first line is server identifier. So we need to tell our DHCP server who we are. In this case, it's going to be the IP address of your Prometheus virtual machine, and it's going to be the IP address that the ENS33 network card preferably has there. Okay, so my machine is sitting on 50, so it's going to be 28.50 for me. It's going to be 51 to whatever it is for your computer. So that should be your Prometheus IP address, not the host itself. Yeah. Lots of comments, different versions of everything that's happening, and so on. Option domain servers. This should be 251 because this is our DNS server that we now use in the lab. Okay, this will be the same for everybody. We then need what are called subnet declarations. We'll have two different types of subnet declarations in this file. We'll have blank subnet declarations that we don't actually use, and we'll have one subnet declaration that pertains to network 30, which is where we will give out all of the information to our client so that we can actually do our Kickstart setup. We need to have all of the other subnets present though, because if a network card exists on your system, your DHCP server needs to know about it. So we'll start with network 28. What we need to do here is we need to tell our DHCP server which networks or which subnets actually exist on our computer. So our ENS33 network card is connected to subnet 28. So we need to give the network address for subnet 28, which is going to be 28.0 for all of you. Okay. And we're going to need the subnet mask for it, which in our case, it's going to be this one. Remember, after routing, you must have changed this to /23. Okay, so this is the subnet mask that you should have. These lines, this subnet declaration should be the same for all of you because you all are on subnet 28 already. We then need to have subnet 31. So this is for your VMnet 1 network card. All right. So you will need to have your network address here for whatever corresponds to your machine. So I'm working on the last line of the file, so I am 252, and it's simply a coincidence that it just matches the number on the subnet mask. Okay, the subnet mask should be the same for all of you. Your network 31 should always have a 252 subnet mask, just like network 30 does as well. So subnets 28 and 31 are out of the way. We can then move on to subnet 30, which, as you can see, has much more information inside it than all the rest, because we will actually use this, because our virtual machine that we'll deploy will be connected onto VMnet 30, so we need more information about this. So this guy is 3252 for me, so that's my network address. My subnet mask, is 252. Option routers. This will be the router that, yes, go on.
Should be 250.
What? Where?
The IP, the data subnet.
On the subnet declaration, you need the network address.
Yeah, that should be 250.
No, this is for my subnet. My subnet has a network address of 252. I have usable IP addresses of 253, 254, and a broadcast of 255. It's just my computer specifically, yeah? It's the last line on the subnets file. All right. So, option routers. This needs to be the gateway to network 30 inside your Prometheus, which so happens to be VMnet 0. So that's the IP address of your VMnet 0 network card, which should be your first usable IP address from the list of IP addresses that you can use. So for me, this is actually 253. We then move on to subnet mask, that's 252 for me, and for all of us, of course. We then have a broadcast address. So for me, that's 255, whatever broadcast address you have on your network. And then we have option log servers, and I am going to use my ENS33 IP address for this. And you should do the same as well. All right. So once we've defined the basic structure of the subnet, there is a very annoying statement here called next server, so that your system knows who the next available DHCP server on the system is, and there is no other next available DHCP server on the system. It's just you. All right. So same IP address. You might think that this statement is not necessary and you don't really have to have it there. If you remove it, things won't work. It actually took us a while to figure out why this is happening. Okay, so in that subnet declaration that is active and we're using, we then need to have a host declaration. So we need to define some parameters for the virtual machine that we're building for our client. The first one of these parameters is going to be the hardware Ethernet address. That is the MAC address of the network card that connects onto VMnet 0 on your new vPrometheus Kickstart machine. It's the blank VM that you just built. There are several ways to find this, but no matter what you do, the first thing that you need to do is you need to start up this virtual machine. It will fail to boot because it doesn't have an operating system, it's not connected onto a DVD, there is no DHCP server to start an installation from it. So it will try to start, it will not find the local hard drive to boot from, it will try to boot from the network and it will show you its MAC address on the terminal. Okay, either way, if you don't boot it, because it's a VMware virtual machine, VMware allocates hardware addresses to the VMs only at boot time, when they start for the first time, because that's when the configuration file for it gets completed. If you don't start the VM, you could go to the settings of the virtual machine, look at the network card, go to advanced, where the hardware address should be there, but it's going to be blank. You can generate it there and then if you want, and you can try and do that, or you can just simply boot the machine and see what happens. All right, either way is acceptable, you can do whatever you like. However, this needs to be the MAC address of the virtual machine. This is mostly a security measure because this is a way that the client that you're building will identify itself to the DHCP server. The DHCP server will not give an IP address and all of the network information to any machine that connects to it. All right, it needs to be someone that it knows and it has permission to actually give information to. All right, so MAC address from the virtual machine goes here. Fixed address, what IP address are we going to give to this new virtual machine after it's built? It's going to be your second and last usable IP address. So for me, that's 254. You will already have used this IP address on your vPrometheus 0. Don't start vPrometheus 0 while you're doing this. Okay, so the last line on this is the location of something called KSCFG. We're doing a Kickstart installation. KSCFG stands to reason is the configuration file that does the Kickstart. Okay, so this is an answer file to all of the operating system installation questions. So when you install an operating system, it will ask you what language do you want to use, what partitioning do you want to use, do you want to turn your firewall on or off, what packages, what sort of software installation you want to perform, and so on. All of the answers to those questions are inside this file. So if you look at it, install OS instead of upgrade, CD-ROM installation method, first boot enable or disable, NFS installation media, so we'll talk about this later what it is. Anyway, so this is what the file will look like. Now I am giving you this file, so for example you have the partitioning here and you have the software selection and so on. I am giving you this file in the Kickstart utils folder. Do not use it. Okay, you must not use this file. The most important reason is because it has a root password inside it that nobody knows. Okay, we're only giving it to you so that you see what the file should look like in the end. You need to create your Kickstart config file with a piece of software that exists in CentOS that's called Kickstart Configurator. It's called system-config-kickstart. All right. It starts up a nice graphical user interface. It has different pages and tabs. It asks you all of the installation questions per section. And then once you fill that in and save it, it will generate this Kickstart config file and it will give it the correct structure, format, and everything else. Okay?
Sorry, sir.
Yes.
It's a question on the DHCP configuration.
Okay.
The next server, DHCP next server.
Yes.
You mentioned. Say in production, for instance, if you have an environment that have multiple DHCP servers.
So that would be the next one in the hierarchy of DHCP servers that you have available on the system. So normally you would have different DHCP servers per domain, for example, or per group of computers that you want to manage, or per subnet. It really depends. So something like this would basically tell the system where you can find, you can have multiple next servers as well, actually. So you can tell the system where everything is. Okay.
So the second question is this configuration, this specification for the
Subnet.
client, the web
Yeah.
client, and you define the client using a MAC address.
Yeah.
How does it scale? If you're doing this deployment for multiple,
Because when your DHCP server, you just make more of this. So you take this and you clone it. So our Kickstart config, so our DHCP server on our Kickstart server has, well, we have split it into different servers per lab essentially. So the A2.NET one has 48 of these. Yeah. So the subnet declaration is the same for all of them. However, there is one host statement for each of the hosts that we can build. And then the Kickstart files themselves are not called KS CFG, they're called KS Alonso CFG or KS Verstappen CFG and so on and so forth. Yeah? So you have a different configuration file for each of them. You could try to have the same configuration file for all of them because the setup is the same. However, we have different host names and different IP addresses for all of them. Now, if you're going for automatic IP address allocation through the DHCP server, you can do this. So you can give a host name and you can give an IP address to multiple computers. You only need one configuration file. They're all the same anyway. So it's done. Okay. It's just a bit, so it depends on how you actually want to do it and how you manually or how explicitly you want to define everything. Yeah? So this points us to the Kickstart config file. The Kickstart config file should look like this, but you will generate it using the software in the system. And what actually happens, the process that is being followed is your virtual machine will start. It will look for a DHCP server. The DHCP server will identify the virtual machine through its MAC address and will say, oh yes, I know you have this IP address. Oh, and by the way, here is a Kickstart config file. Your client will try to find the Kickstart config file. That file will be available on the network. So we need to make it available on the network through NFS, Network File Sharing. Yeah. So we need to share a folder. In fact, we're going to need to share 2 folders with information on where everything is. So that's why we're going to set up the service NFS. It's the most complicated configuration file you'll ever see. It's 2 lines. KS config is located in user kick. Okay, so you share user kick to your network address. So for me, that's 252. And with the subnet mask of 252, it's going to be the same for all of us. You will also need to share another folder called mount deploy, because that folder will have a copy of all of the contents of the installation DVD for the operating system. Because once your client gets the Kickstart config file, it will have all of the answers to the installation questions for the operating system. However, it will actually need the files to actually install on its hard drive. It will find those files inside mount deploy. So all you need to do is get the ISO image, open it, take the contents of the DVD and paste them inside mount deploy. Once that happens, then the virtual machine will have all of the information and all of the software, the packages that it needs in order to perform the installation. So it will start up, it will do the installation, and it will restart, and you'll be able to just log in with whatever username and password you created. And that's the end of it. Okay, so the whole process is you build a blank virtual machine and you find out its MAC address. You then build a DHCP server. You give it all of the information about the network infrastructure that you have on your computer completely. You explicitly give it more information on subnet 30 about the host that you're going to build as well. That last bit of information on that one is the location of the Kickstart config file, which is the answer file to the installation questions. You create that answer file using system config Kickstart. The virtual machine starts up. It boots from an ISO image, and you tell it that you're doing an NFS installation instead of doing an installation from the DVD. It finds all the information from the DHCP server, it gets the files through NFS, and it starts installing. Now there are a couple of details, intricacies about all this. First of all, when you're starting the virtual machine, you will need to start it from the DVD. So this is the easiest way to do it. So the blank virtual machine that you will build, you can actually attach the CentOS ISO to it. Don't do this when you're building the VM. When you're building the VM, you should choose, I will install an operating system later, so that the virtual machine actually starts, so that it doesn't do an unattended installation. Okay, when you were building vPrometheus 0, the thing just asked you for the root password or the user password, and then it just did everything itself. All right, this is because VMware detected the CentOS DVD and said, okay, I know this, I'll build it. All right, you don't want this. So, create the virtual machine, and then once you found the MAC address as well, you can then go into its settings and attach the DVD ISO image onto it. This is purely for the purposes of starting up the virtual machine. The additional task on this lab sheet is to actually do a PXE boot system. And that PXE boot does not require the DVD. Okay, so you'll need to disconnect the DVD for that second virtual machine that you will build for this one. All right, now, you'll start from the DVD. The other detail that you need to know about all this is that there are some small issues with the Kickstart configurator utility. Of course, because why wouldn't there be? So, if you type in a terminal system config Kickstart and nothing comes up, it means that it's not installed. Yum install system config Kickstart. All right, you install that, and then I think it appears in applications utilities or in application system tools somewhere in the menu. Find it, just says Kickstart. You open it. It has different pages for each of the sections, so language, user accounts, hardware partitioning. When you get to the software selection, there is a wonderful bug that they never fixed. It's brilliant. So it doesn't actually give you any software to choose from. All right. However, there is a fix for that, and you need to go into Kickstart utils, and you'll need to find the Kickstart packages fix text. Open it and follow the instructions. Okay, so once you've installed the system config Kickstart utility, you will then need to make a small change to it. I think it's on this particular file, to actually tell it to where to find the packages that it's installing from. All right, so you need to do this, restart Kickstart, so basically shut down the program and start again, and the software will be there available for you to actually choose. And you can choose the type of installation that you want to make, and you can choose all of the packages that you want to have next to it as well. Now, the packages that you will choose for this installation, I haven't given you an explicit requirement for it. At the very least, I want to have a graphical user interface. Okay, so you can do a sort of a GNOME workstation installation. At the very least, it needs to have like the base package, the graphical interface, and everything that corresponds to it, like GNOME and everything else. Okay, it doesn't need to be anything too special, but you can do whatever you like with it. Also, there are pre-installation and post-installation script capabilities in Kickstart. So for example, when we build our computers for A2.NET, for all of our labs, we do install the package selection that we want to install. However, after that, we actually install and configure LDAP for authentication. We tell it we use YP-bind, the server to connect to is that specific one for authentication. We install packages like VMware Player and things like that. All of this can be automated. So you can have pre-installation and post-installation scripts that run during install time with Kickstart and get software installed in there. So if you want to get some additional marks in this, you can try and do some customized configuration like this as well. It can be as simple as using a different wallpaper. Okay, but if you do get Kickstart working fairly quickly, and you do get PXE working fairly quickly as well, and you find yourself sitting in front of the computer on the 6th of December and you have nothing to do, this is a good thing to do. Okay, so there is a lot of customization that you can do with this, and I can let you do whatever you like, really, as long as by the end of the lab sheet you have a client that was built by your server and not by you. Okay. Now, the extra task for the PXE boot, you can also install it on subnet 30 again if you like, or you can make it a new thing completely, and you can actually configure it on subnet 31. This means that you'll have to go into your DHCP server, and you'll need to make a complete subnet declaration, just like the one you have on 30. You need to add the host in there, just like you have on 30, and so on. And you need to do whatever PXE booting actually tells you to do about it. All right. I'm not supposed to help you with the PXE booting because it's the optional task and everything. However, I probably will if you really get stuck somewhere. Okay. But if you just call me to your desk and tell me how do I get PXE boot to work, I will tell you Google it. Yeah, it's only fair. But if you get into it and you get stuck somewhere, I will try and help you with it. Okay. So that's it really. So that will be the last lab sheet for the module. All right. So we won't have any more lectures for the following Wednesdays. I will set your attendance automatically in there, so don't worry about it. All right. And that's it. Do you have any questions about this? There are lots of things to configure, lots of moving parts. All the services need to be configured. All of the configuration files need to be in the correct location, which is mentioned in the lab sheet. And the services need to be running as well, all at the same time and all correctly, I guess. Also, you definitely need to be running the VM subnet script. So that's the only thing from the previous lab sheets that you need working for this lab sheet to work as well. Okay, so you don't need any of your previous virtual machines themselves, but you do need VM subnet to start VMnet 30 and 31 so your Kickstart actually works. Okay, yes?
You go back to the configuration script for the DHCP. We're supposed to specify the IP address for
this one.
Yes. And you said we shouldn't vPrometheus 1. That we shouldn't launch Prometheus.
So you shouldn't launch vPrometheus 0.
Okay, Prometheus 0.
Because this is on subnet 30,
Exactly.
And you only have two usable IP addresses. One of them is on VMnet 0 on Prometheus.
Yes.
So the second one will be the address that you already use for vPrometheus 0.
Because of conflicts.
So as long as you don't start vPrometheus 0, it's fine. Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much.